In the quiet of her modest home in Ouagadougou, Mariam Sankara sat at a worn wooden desk, her hands trembling as they clutched a pen. The ink hovered over a blank page, hesitant, like a seed unsure of the soil it would meet. Outside, the city hummed with the restless energy of 2025, a nation teetering between hope and uncertainty under Captain Ibrahim Traoré's rule. The lace curtains, yellowed by time, filtered the afternoon sun, casting fragile patterns across the room. On the wall behind her hung a faded photograph of Thomas Sankara, his beret cocked defiantly, his eyes alight with a vision that had once set Burkina Faso ablaze. 38 years had passed since his assassination, yet the ache of his absence was as raw as ever, a wound that time refused to heal. Mariam was no stranger to silence. For decades, she had carried her grief in solitude, her voice stifled by a nation that had buried her husband's name along with his body. Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary who renamed their country Burkina Faso, land of upright people, had been gunned down on October 15, 1987, his dreams of self-reliance and dignity for the poor silenced by betrayal. The regime that followed, led by Blaise Compaoré, had erased him from history, renaming streets, burning his speeches, and branding him a naive dreamer. Mariam, too, had been erased, a widow forced into the shadows, her sons raised under the weight of a father's ghost. But now, in 2025, something had shifted. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young military leader who seized power in September 2022, had begun to resurrect Sankara's memory. At 36, Traoré was a figure both revered and divisive, a soldier who spoke of Pan-Africanism and defiance against foreign domination, much like Thomas had. His government faced relentless challenges, jihadist insurgencies in the north, economic strain, and whispers of discontent among the elite. Yet Traoré had made a bold gesture. A new monument to Sankara, unveiled in Ouagadougou's Place de la Révolution, a towering bronze figure capturing Thomas in mid-stride, fist raised, as if urging the nation forward. The ceremony, broadcast across Burkina Faso, had drawn thousands, their chants of Sankara vit, Sankara lives, echoing through the streets. Mariam had not attended. She watched alone, her television flickering with static as Traoré spoke of Sankara's vision. A Burkina Faso free from the grip of neocolonialism, where farmers owned their land and children learned in classrooms untainted by foreign agendas. Her heart had clenched at the sight of the statue, its details so precise. The calluses on Thomas's hands from planting trees, the creases around his eyes from laughter. She had wept not from sorrow, but from a gratitude too vast for words. For the first time in decades, she felt compelled to speak, to write to this young captain who had dared to unearth her husband's legacy. "Dear Captain Traoré," she began, her pen scratching against the paper. "Forgive an old woman her trembling hand. Your monument to Thomas has stirred something in me, a fire I thought had long turned to ash. For 38 years, I have lived as a specter in my own land, watching as they stripped my husband's name from history, called him a fool for believing Burkina Faso could stand tall. They murdered him, Captain, and with him they tried to kill his ideas. But you have dragged his memory from the shadows. You have placed it where it belongs, in the light." She paused, her eyes drifting to the photograph on the wall. Thomas had been 33 when they met in 1983, a young captain himself, storming through the drought-stricken north in a battered Renault, rallying farmers and laborers against a corrupt elite. Mariam, then a teacher in a village near Ouagadougou, had scolded him for interrupting her class, his boots caked with red earth. He had grinned, unapologetic, and asked her students what they dreamed of. "A full belly," one girl had whispered. "A tractor," said a boy. When he turned to Mariam, she had pointed to her cracked blackboard and said, "A country where these children don't have to dream of food." 3 weeks later, he proposed, vowing they would fight side by side. Their marriage had been a partnership of ideals. Thomas renamed the nation, sold the government's Mercedes fleet, and vaccinated millions against measles and meningitis. Mariam spoke at rallies, her voice amplifying the need for girls' education. At night, they debated over bitter tea, laughing about mangoes and Mozart, dreaming of a Burkina Faso where the desert would bloom. But the dream ended in 1987 when gunfire tore through their home. Mariam had hidden their sons, Philippe and Auguste, in a closet, her body pressed against the door as bullets shattered the night. When silence fell, she found Thomas's body in the courtyard, riddled with holes. The newspapers called it an accident. The new regime called him a traitor. For years, Mariam endured. Friends vanished. Strangers spat at her in markets. Her sons grew up flinching at the sound of motorcycles, their father's name a forbidden whisper. When Philippe asked why Thomas was killed, she could only say, because he loved too much. But Traore's monument had changed that. Last week, Mariam had visited the statue at dawn when the streets were empty. She pressed her palm to the bronze, its cold surface a fleeting connection to the man she had lost. A group of schoolchildren arrived, their teacher explaining who Sankara was. A boy no older than 10 asked Mariam if she knew the president who fought for the poor. When she nodded, he hugged her, his small arms fierce with pride. That child, born 6 decades after Thomas's death, had found a hero. Mariam's pen moved again, the words flowing like a river breaking through a dam. Captain Traore, you have given my husband back to Burkina Faso, but I see the weight you carry. Your eyes, so young yet so burdened, remind me of Thomas in his early days, idealistic, impatient, burning to mend a broken world. I was there when he learned the cost of such fire. Permit me, an old woman who has outlived too many dreams, to share what I see in you and in our nation today. She leaned back, her gaze drifting to the window where Ouagadougou's skyline flickered in the heat. Burkina Faso in 2025 was a land of contradictions. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who had seized power in a 2022 coup at just 34, had ignited hope among the youth with his fiery speeches against foreign exploitation. He spoke of Sankara's dream, a self-reliant nation, free from the chokehold of French mining companies and Western aid that came with strings. His government had nationalized parts of the gold industry, redirecting profits to local communities, and launched irrigation projects echoing Thomas's efforts to tame the Sahel's encroaching desert. Yet the nation teetered on the edge. Jihadist attacks in the north and east had displaced millions, leaving villages as ghosts of themselves. Food prices soared, and whispers of dissent grew louder in urban markets, where traders grumbled about military rule. Mariam had seen this before. In 1983, when Thomas took power, Burkina Faso was crippled by drought and corruption. He had rallied the people, farmers, teachers, women, to build their own future, planting 10 million trees, vaccinating children, and teaching girls to read. But the enemies were many, local elites who profited from the old order, foreign powers wary of his defiance, and comrades who envied his resolve. Mariam wrote, "You, Captain, walk the same tightrope. The statue you unveiled is more than bronze, it is a seed. But seeds do not grow in barren soil. The snakes that killed Thomas still slither in the grass. They wear suits now, not uniforms, sitting in air-conditioned offices in Ouagadougou and foreign capitals. They will call you reckless for honoring a dreamer. They will whisper that Sankara's ghost threatens their power." She thought of the news reports she had heard on her crackling radio. Traoré's government had expelled French troops in 2023, a move that echoed Thomas's rejection of colonial ties but left Burkina Faso vulnerable to insurgents. Russian advisors had arrived, promising weapons and training, yet their presence stirred unease among elders who remembered Thomas's warning. "No one liberates you but yourself." Mariam had no illusions about Traoré's rule. His youth rallies, where students waved Sankara's image on banners, were vibrant but fragile. The military's grip on power had silenced critics, and rumors of arrests chilled the air. Still, she saw in him a spark Thomas would have recognized, a refusal to bow. "Thomas used to say revolutions are won in the small things," she wrote. "Not just in speeches or statues, but in classrooms where girls learn their worth, in clinics where mothers survive childbirth, in fields where farmers own their harvest. You have begun this work. I heard of the wells your government dug in Dori, the schools rebuilt in Kaya. These are the bricks of the nation Thomas dreamed of. But beware, Captain, the world is watching, and it does not love upright people." When Thomas sold the government's Mercedes and rode a bicycle to work, they mocked him. When he cut ties with the IMF, they plotted. You, too, will be tested. Mariam's thoughts turned to her sons, Philippe and Auguste, now men in their 40s. Philippe, a doctor in Savaré, treated children in displaced camps, his hands steady despite the chaos. Auguste, a history teacher in Ouagadougou, taught his students about their grandfather, no longer hiding his name. When Mariam sent them photos of the statue, they called her, their voices thick with emotion. "Mama," Auguste had said, "does this mean we can speak of him freely now?" She had whispered, "Yes, my son. Thanks to Captain Traoré, we can shout his name." But freedom was fragile. Mariam had visited the statue again, this time at dusk, when young artists painted murals nearby, their brushes tracing Sankara's face. A girl no older than 16 had told her, "We're tired of being France's backyard. Traoré's waking us up." Yet Mariam saw fear in her eyes, the same fear she had felt in 1987 when the gunfire came. She wrote, "Captain, you've planted Sankara's ideas in a new generation, but they are saplings, not yet trees. Protect them, nurture them. And when the weight of leadership crushes you, know that an old woman in Ouagadougou prays for you each night, lighting a candle against the dark." Mariam's hand steadied as she wrote, the memories of Thomas flooding her like a monsoon after a long drought. Captain Traore, to know why your statue of Thomas moves me so, you must know the man I loved, not the legend, but the husband, the father, the dreamer who laughed as easily as he fought. I met him in 1983, in a classroom baked by the Sahel sun, where I rationed chalk and mended torn textbooks. He burst in, a young captain with dust on his boots and fire in his voice, interrupting my lesson to speak of revolution. I scolded him, but his grin disarmed me. He asked my students what they dreamed of, and when a girl whispered a full belly, he turned to me and asked, "And you, madame?" I pointed to the cracked blackboard and said, "A country where hunger is a memory." 3 weeks later, he knelt in the dirt and asked me to marry him, promising we'd build that country together. She smiled faintly, the memory as vivid as the sunlight streaming through her window. Their wedding had been simple, a bowl of millet porridge shared with comrades, a vow to fight side by side. For 4 years they did. Thomas renamed the nation Burkina Faso, a name that carried the weight of dignity. He sold the government's fleet of Mercedes, declaring, "We cannot ride in luxury while our people walk barefoot." He planted 10 million trees to hold back the desert, vaccinated millions against disease, and handed Mariam the microphone at rallies to speak of girls' education. "The revolution needs their voices," he told her. At night, they sat on the porch of their concrete home, drinking bitter tea, debating Marx and mangoes, their sons Philippe and Auguste asleep inside. Thomas would hum a tune, his voice soft, and say, "Mariam will make the desert bloom." But the desert claimed him first. On October 15, 1987, the gunfire came at midnight. Mariam shoved their boys into a closet, her body a shield against the door as bullets tore through their home. When silence fell, she found Thomas in the courtyard, his body broken, his eyes still open to the stars. The newspapers lied, calling it an accident. The new regime burned his books, renamed his streets, and left Mariam to raise their sons in a country that spat on their father's name. "For years I was a ghost," she wrote. "Friends disappeared, strangers cursed me in markets. Philippe and Auguste grew up hiding their father's name, their only inheritance his ghost. When they asked why he died, I said, because he loved too much." Now in 2025, Thomas's love was alive again. Mariam saw it in the crowds at the statue, where women left bundles of millet at its base, a debt repaid for the years Thomas fed the hungry. Teachers brought students to recite his speeches, and old men in faded uniforms saluted, whispering, "We're still here, brother." The youth especially claimed him, painting his face on murals, blasting his quotes on social media, wearing T-shirts that read, "Sankara Lives." Mariam had taken her granddaughter, Amina, to the statue. The girl, Auguste's daughter, traced the inscription, "Thomas Sankara, President of the Poor," and said, "Grandma, I want to be like him." For the first time since 1987, Mariam felt hope crack open inside her. "Captain, you've done more than honor Thomas," she wrote. "You've given him to Amina's generation, to children who dream of engineering and medicine, not just food. But I must speak plainly. Burkina Faso stands at a crossroads. Your words of sovereignty stir the young as Thomas's did, but words alone do not stop bullets. The jihadists who ravage our north, the hunger that stalks our markets, the foreign hands that still pull our strings, these are the locusts of our time." When Thomas was a boy, his village was invaded by locusts, the sky black with their wings. The elders wailed, but his father handed him a sack and said, "Collect them. Locusts are food too." That night they roasted the insects and ate, laughing. "Hunger is a liar," his father told him. "We hold the solution in our hands." Mariam's pen paused, her eyes burning. "Captain, you've shown Burkina Faso how to roast locusts. Your wells in Dori, your schools in Kaya, your defiance of foreign minds, these are solutions we hold. But Thomas learned too late that revolutions are not won with grand gestures alone. They are won in the quiet work, training teachers, arming farmers, listening to the women who know the land's secrets. You are young, as he was. You are bold, as he was, but you must outlive him. Build the Burkina Faso he dreamed of, not with statues, but with lives. Lives that no bullet can erase." Mariam's pen pressed harder against the page, her words a final offering to a man she had never met but whose actions had rekindled her faith. "Captain Traore, I am an old woman now, my hands ache and my years are few, but my heart is light because of you. When I took my granddaughter Amina to see Thomas's statue, she looked up at me and asked, 'Grandma, will Burkina Faso ever be like he wanted?' I told her, 'It can be if men like Captain Traore keep fighting.' You have given me the courage to believe that again, but courage alone is not enough. The road you walk is treacherous, and the enemies of upright people are patient. They wait in the shadows, as they did for Thomas, coiling around anyone who dares to stand tall." She thought of Burkina Faso in 2025, a nation straining under the weight of its own rebirth. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's defiance of foreign powers had won him allies among the youth, who filled Ouagadougou's streets chanting for sovereignty. His government's efforts, rebuilding schools, arming local militias to fight jihadists, redirecting gold profits to farmers, echoed Thomas's vision of self-reliance. Yet the challenges were relentless. Insurgents controlled swaths of the north, displacing families into camps where hunger gnawed. Foreign media painted Traoré as a reckless autocrat, while local elites, enriched by decades of compromise, plotted in private. Mariam knew these forces too well. They had betrayed Thomas, their whispers paving the way for the bullets that took him. "Captain, you remind me of Thomas when he was young," she wrote. He, too, burned with the need to fix everything at once. But he learned too late that revolutions are fragile. They need roots, not just wings. Build those roots, Captain. Train teachers to carry Thomas's ideas into classrooms. Arm women with the tools to feed their families. Listen to the elders who know the land's rhythms. Your statue has planted a seed, but it is the people who will make it grow. Each day they gather at its base, mothers leaving millet, students reciting his words, artists painting his face on walls. They are your army, not of guns, but of dreams. Lead them wisely, and they will build the Burkina Faso Thomas died for. Mariam's thoughts turned to her sons. Philippe, healing children in Traoré's camps, had told her, "Mama, I see Papa in the faces of my patients, poor but proud." August, teaching history in Ouagadougou, said his students now asked about Sankara without fear. "Does this mean we can say his name aloud?" he had asked. "Yes," Mariam wrote. "Thanks to you, Captain, we can shout it, sing it, carve it into the future, but protect this freedom, nurture it. And when the weight of leadership crushes your shoulders, remember this. An old woman in Ouagadougou lights a candle for you each night, praying you outlive the bullets." She signed her name, Mariam Sankara, and folded the letter, her hand steady now. 3 days later, Captain Traoré stood alone before the statue, Mariam's words clutched in his hand. The moon bathed the bronze in silver, and Ouagadougou hummed around him, vendors frying plantains, students debating under neon signs. In his pocket was a photo of his mother, who had sold peanuts to pay his school fees, her dying words, "Make them see us," now clear. That night, in a cramped office where Sankara once planned a revolution, Traoré wrote his reply. "Madame Sankara, your letter is a compass. I am no Thomas Sankara, his brilliance humbles me, but your words guide me. The irrigation project he dreamed of is underway. The schools you fought for will have books by next season. I will not just honor his memory, I will make it unnecessary by building the nation he saw. Your sons, your granddaughter, your candle, they are my strength. I promise you this, Burkina Faso will rise, not on my shoulders, but on the people's. Your soldier, Ibrahim." The next morning, a girl named Fatima paused near the statue, selling phone credits but dreaming of engineering. In her backpack was a tattered copy of Thomas Sankara Speaks. In 10 years, she would design Burkina Faso's first solar-powered hospital. Above her, Sankara's bronze fist pointed to the horizon. Somewhere, Mariam smiled.